Hello everyone and welcome to the Quilted Chore Coat Quilt-Along. I am so excited that you are here and that we're officially getting started. If you're new to me, I'm Casey. I'm a quilt and fabric designer based in northern Wyoming. I design patterns that are unique, on trend for quilts and clothing patterns that are modern, wearable, and beginner friendly, and the chore coat is one of my absolute favorites. Whether you've sewn garments before or this is your first one, you're in the right place. This is a guided quilt along where we'll be making the quilted chore coat together, step by step. Each week we'll focus on a specific phase of the process so it never feels overwhelming. This is week 0, our prep week. Next week will be week 1, but this week we're prepping ourselves to tackle this fun pattern. This is not about sewing fast or making something perfect. It's about slowing down, learning new skills, and ending up with a coat that you will actually wear. You don't need to keep up in real time, and you definitely don't have to have everything figured out today. The quilted chore coat pattern is designed to work with a variety of quilts, newly made, vintage, pieced, or even whole cloth. It's intentionally designed to be flexible so you can really make it your own. The pattern includes sizes extra small through 4XL. You can use snaps or buttons for the final closure, and it has the option to modify the length as desired. There are also detailed instructions for cutting and constructing from a quilted base. I designed this coat to have a relaxed fit, to be wearable and versatile, while also being super on trend. If you haven't opened the pattern yet, that's fine. We'll talk through everything you need to look for this week. I also want to share a few tips with you for working with quilted material. I have a detailed blog post on how to select a quilt for this particular pattern, and I'll link it in the YouTube description. But I also want to talk to you just about a few baseline things for working with quilted material because it is unique. The first thing is, at a minimum, you are sewing through 3 layers of fabric at all times. Using a fresh needle and sewing with a walking foot can really improve your final results. Also, I personally have tried to use a serger on my quilted clothing patterns. Now, I don't have a particularly high quality serger, so it worked fine on some of the side seams, but when trying to work with more than 2 layers of the quilted fabric, it did struggle. So just keep that in mind if you're considering using a serger on your quilted clothing pattern. Make sure you have one that is heavy duty enough to handle up to 9 layers of fabric at a time. The second unique quality of quilted material is that it has no stretch. Most fabric used for garment construction has at least one direction of give in it. Quilted material has nothing. This is primarily important when taking into account what size you choose. It needs to be able to fit comfortably, to come on and off comfortably without requiring it to stretch in one direction or the other. Also, keep this in mind if you make a test version because you want to use fabric that mimics as closely as possible the qualities of your quilted material. So find a fabric that has minimal stretch as well to give you a true idea of what your final design will look like when you wear it. So like I said, this is prep week, and honestly, it is the most important week of the entire quilt along. The goal this week is not to sew. It is to set yourself up for success. Here's what we'll be doing. Number 1, making sure your quilt works. Like I mentioned before, I have a blog post that goes into a lot of detail in how to select a quilt for this pattern. I will be using this double Irish chain quilt that I made. It's a free pattern on my website. It comes together very quickly. If you want to make it in time to start next week, that would totally be doable. So we'll be talking about the size of your quilt. This one is a large throw. It's 70 by 70, and that is large enough to accommodate almost all sizes for the chore coat, unless you're very particular about where your pieces are going to sit. This quilt is fairly non-directional, so for me, it doesn't really matter where I put my pieces on this quilt. It'll give me the result that I want. However, if you have a design where you want very particular sections on perhaps the back or on the sides or on the sleeves, you may want to give yourself a little more wiggle room on the size of your quilt. Second, the thickness of your quilt. So a high loft batting will make it a little more difficult to sew through your layers, as well as attaching the buttons and the snaps at the end. I recommend a fairly low loft batting to be used. Most vintage quilts will be perfect because they have some wear in them already. But for this one, I selected a lower loft batting so it has a little more movement to it, but also my layers don't get out of control when I'm trying to sew on the collar or the cuffs or those sort of areas. Like I said before, the next thing to keep in mind is the layout of your quilt, whether or not you're going to need to give yourself a little more margin on the size in order to catch those areas that you want in your final design. If adjustments are needed, this is the best time to make them. And like I said, we will have, this is week 0, and then we'll have 4 weeks of the actual Quilt-Along. These videos will be available throughout the entire Quilt-Along. So if you need to regroup and get a new quilt, I would do it now instead of waiting till later and being unhappy with your final design. You'll have plenty of time to catch up, even if you need to speed piece together an Irish chain between now and the next week. Number 2 that we're going to talk about this week is assembling the paper quilt pattern. Now, I know this can be a pain for a lot of people. It is a lot of printed pages and it's a lot of taping together, but I'm going to have a separate video that shows you exactly how I cut my sections to piece them quickly and tape them together, and hopefully it'll make your experience as easy as possible. There's also a print shop file version available when you purchase the pattern. So if you have a local print shop in town, you can send it there, and I'm sure within a few days they can get you a printed version of it so that you don't have to piece together all of the individual papers yourself. Number 3 is an optional practice version. Now, this might feel superfluous, but let me tell you, there is nothing worse than cutting into a quilt that either has sentimental value or just that you took a lot of time to piece or that you paid money for at a garage sale. There is nothing worse than cutting into that quilt only to have your final piece not fit correctly. Now, this pattern has a sizing chart to help you select the correct size. However, all of us are shaped differently, all bodies are different, and so while you may generally fall into a particular size, it is likely that you won't fit the exact construction of that size. Perhaps you'll want to shorten the sleeves, perhaps you'll want to lengthen them, perhaps the shoulders will be a little longer than you would like them to be. The best way to get the result that you want is to make a test version. If you're new to garment sewing or just want more confidence, this is the week to get some cheap muslin fabric and make a practice version to check the fit and check the length. Keep in mind why and where you want to wear your jacket. Here in Wyoming, I almost always have a sweater or a thick layer underneath my jacket, and so I'm going to take that into account when selecting my size. I don't want it to only fit me when I have a thin t-shirt on underneath it. I want it to be able to still fit comfortably when I have a chunky sweater on. However, if you live in Texas or Florida, maybe you only want to have a thin long sleeve on underneath yours. And so you want yours to be a more fitted version, whereas I'm going to trend toward the higher end of my measurements to get a more relaxed fit at the end. Does that make sense? I know this is a lot, but I'm trying to give you as much information as possible to give you a positive experience with this pattern. Number 4, supplies check. You should have received a downloadable supplies list whenever you signed up for the Quilt-Along. And on there, it'll have some just recommended things to make your quilting experience better. The biggest thing is the clips that you use, the fabric clips, are so much better than pins when sewing through quilted material. So I would highly recommend having some of those on hand. You can purchase them at most craft stores in town. The adhesive spray, I do think, makes a big difference in how well your template lays on the quilted clothing. And I have found that using snaps instead of buttons is much, much easier on quilted clothing because, at least for me, working multiple layers through the button foot on my machine, and I have a nice machine that can handle most things, I don't get a finish that I particularly like. Adding the snaps, it takes 5 minutes, all of them are done. I don't have the headache, seam ripping multiple times, taking out all that thread of a buttonhole that is not working the way that I want it to. So it's up to you, but the snap gadget that I linked on the supply sheet, I highly recommend. So by the end of this week, you should feel calm, prepared, and excited, not stressed. That's for me to feel. So I want to say clearly, there is no wrong way to do this quilt along. Your coat does not need to look like mine or anybody else's. Quilts vary, bodies vary, skill levels vary, but that is part of what makes this project so special. If you get stuck, if you feel unsure or need to pivot your plan, that's normal. I'll be sharing guidelines throughout. And if you have questions, the YouTube comments is going to be the best ways to ask that. At the end of each week, I'm going to go through all the comments on these YouTube videos and try to start each week with a quick Q&A answering the most frequently asked questions so that everybody can hear the response. You can follow along with the quilt along through Instagram, through emails, and here on YouTube. And I would love to see what you're working on. If you share your progress, you can use the hashtag Quilted Chore Coat so we can all cheer each other on and get inspired. I'll be sharing reminders, tips, and answers to common questions as we go. We'll also be giving out a prize to one participant each week. I'll have a fun prompt or a question for you to answer. So this week, the prize is going to go to whoever can guess how many people have joined this quilt along as of Wednesday morning when this video goes live. So I'm gonna make a reel about the quilt along on my Instagram at wellspringdesigns_co. Make sure you're following me there. And I want you to go and comment and guess how many people you think are joining us in this quilt along. I'll give you a hint. It is between 1 and 1,000. Whoever is the closest without going over will win one of these pre-cut paparazzi bundles from Riley Blake. If you are the closest, I will tag you in one of my stories, get your email address to cross-check that you have joined the quilt along and purchased the pattern. If so, you will get sent some free fabric. If more than one people guess, I do have a couple of these, so I can send them your way. So if all you do this week is read through the pattern and gather supplies, that is a win. Prep week is all about building confidence, not pressure. I'm so glad you're here. I cannot wait to make these coats together, so let's get started.